Right. So start off with just making yourself comfortable in your chair. As always, as you start up, and particularly in the chillier weather, go nice and easy. And just coming into the basic posture gives you a chance just to get a sort of sense of what's going on in your body. You know, areas that might be stiff that maybe you want to take a little bit more care around. And again, the effort that you make to notice those things just increases this feeling of anchoring of your attention. Feeling the weight of your body pushing down through your hips with about 30% of your weight in your feet. So trying to move towards getting those details correct, which is an ongoing task. And it's partly because of the physical side of it, of course, but partly because it brings our attention in. So I've been using this image of the mountain as a sort of simile for um, central equilibrium, the stillness, the calmness, the strength that we would associate with that. The other simile I've been using recently is the watchtower. This comes not directly from Tai Chi, but from related traditions. And that's a bit difficult to sort of get a sense for in our culture, but maybe thinking of a lookout post on the coast, a coast guard post or something like that, a place where you can sit and simply observe. And this is not the total sort of role of our minds, but is the one that all the others are fed by. And again, another idea associated with this and associated with the mountain is this sense of stillness, both mind and body, as things begin to settle in. A very uh, a very fragile stillness it can feel sometimes. It's very easy for our attention to get drawn away, and we find ourselves starting to fidget in the chair and so on and so forth. Just be patient when you realize you're doing that. Come back to that awareness of posture, maybe an awareness of your breathing. And obviously later, it'll be an awareness of our movements. And when we go into the initial tapping exercises, an awareness of the sensation and the effects of the tapping. So just rubbing your hands together and tapping over your face. And then over your head and neck. Down to one shoulder, and then your arm. And the other side. Upper part of your chest. And then down to your belly. And the legs. Now sit back in your chair. So we have the idea of central equilibrium. The Chinese term is Zhongding. Another aspect of Tai Chi is encompassed by this term Sung, to relax, to release, to let go, to be calm, to be still, perhaps. Also to be supple and so on and so forth. It's a range of potential meanings. And we can think of sung, the process of sung, the process of releasing, as being the process that brings us into central equilibrium, the the footpath to the mountain, if if you like. It's also true to say that when we approach central equilibrium, we're approaching a state where some becomes easier, so it's not quite linear. But in terms of what we're doing right now, just that sense of being able to sit into the chair, allowing your weight to settle, becoming more aware of the weight of your body in the chair, becoming more aware of the chair that is supporting you and how it is supporting you. All of these are elements that we want to be in place if at all possible while we're doing the exercises, and they will all build up. And one of the very clear outcomes, I think, from this is the quality of the movement that we find in Tai Chi. And so when we have that quality, it's an indication that we're doing quite well with things like Sung, Zhongding, central equilibrium. But when we lose that, then it's time to come back to the mountain and to consider everything that might be involved in in that process. One of the reasons I like to start off like this with the two postures we've done is to establish that as the sort of the base for everything else that we do. Notice changes and patterns of movement in your body with things like your breathing. Coming back to the upright position once again, trying to bring that feeling of sitting very much into the posture, sitting into the chair, of course. Your upper body sitting into your hips, and those more obviously in your upper body, but really all the way through your body. So your shoulders are flowing down into your skeleton, into your spine, and into your belly, and so on. And when we can do that, the degree to which we can do it is the degree to which we can become aware of this quality of inner strength that we want to begin to be able to maintain and in a sense to move from. We want to try and initiate the movements that we make from that slightly deeper aspect of our body. So then just gently turning in your neck, not putting pressure on the side of your neck as you turn. And then hands in front of your shoulders. Remember, these are the preparatory exercises. And again, there's an element of exploration here. How does it feel when you rotate your shoulders like this? How does it feel in your back and your chest? Is there a stiffness there? And just temper the movement to account for those, to flow around that resistance, maybe to just to begin to dissolve it, to break it up a little bit. And then going forwards. Down to the sides. Okay. So working principally at the moment with the big joints of the body, sometimes referred to as energy gates. And we want the gate to be free to allow passageway, to allow feeling the movement through our body, for the gravity, the upward movement that comes as a result of yielding to the pull of gravity, and whatever other movements are taking place. Also a multitude, of course, apart from the actual exercises. Breathing is a movement, digestion is a movement, circulation of blood, obviously, and so on and so forth. And then winding around. Back the other way. Just the hands. Tilting your pelvis forward so your weight goes more into your legs, pushing gently against the ground, then your hips drop back. The combination bringing you back to the upright. So obviously hips are significant here. So in knees and ankles, just check to see whether you're sort of tightening around the knee. Remember, think of your knee being the space between bones of your legs, encased in the capsule. We want the capsule to be in good condition, of course. But what we don't want to do is sort of tighten up, and that's a very common thing, and it's not in all of the joints. So we can begin to see again that when we start to soften in the joints, we open the gates, we allow the movement, and in this instance, this key element of the movement of the weight from hips to feet. Weight transfer being one of the driving forces in Tai Chi and Qigong, whether we're talking about the seated from feet to hips and back, or whether we're standing and talking about the weight moving from one leg to another. Turn the middle of your body, and again, soften your hips to allow that turn. And now more of your weight going into the leg that you're looking towards. And in the other direction. And then by rolling your pelvis around gently, drawing your head and shoulders around in a circle, just aware of your spine. Remember, between each vertebra is a joint, a bit different in some ways to the shoulders, for instance, and your knees. But again, we want those spaces to be conducive to a sense of movement, of the transmission of movement. One of the things that will spoil that for us, make that more difficult, is if we move too far. Another would be if we're too concerned with what our shoulders and head are doing rather than being aware of them and just letting them follow. And that brings us back to that idea of the watch point. You're not trying to move your head and shoulders. You're your sort of intent is focused into the center of your body and that rolling of the pelvis. Change direction there. But you're able to observe from that point of stillness what's happening in shoulders and observe if maybe it is a bit too much. It's very easy to sort of like start stiffening up there. And then coming back to this central position and stepping out with one foot and back. Planting the foot forwards and just coming back. Try and do this without disrupting the equilibrium in the upper part of your body so that your hips sink back. Remember, if you can, to just, once you put the foot down, give it a little bit of a push into the ground, very gentle. And then on the other side. Sitting again for a moment. The hands drop down to your sides, turn your hands palm forwards again. And bird folds its wings, tilt forwards at the same time, just rotate your arms. And the combination means that your fingers will trace out a pretty significant curve. Bird folds its wings. And then keeping your hands, excuse me, keeping your hands facing backwards, fisherman castanet. Tilt the pelvis so your shoulders go forwards, soften your elbows and your wrists, arm being drawn through. Press down gently through your feet, feel the pull from your hips. That generates the sort of source energy for moving your arms as you move your weight. But then just consider what's happening between your hips and your shoulders, areas of your body expanding, others contracting, and then the change as you change direction, or later as you change exercises. One more time, and forwards, and then rolling the ball in. Push back with your arms. Stay in this extended position, feeling the movement up through your belly and your chest. Just letting your elbows drop down. And your arms springing forward. Just growing out of your shoulders gently. And then back. Just check in, see what's happening with those areas that felt a bit tight or blocked before. Sometimes we find that they've simply dissolved away. Other times we might want to bring a little bit more care and attention to them in one way or another. In fact, are we helping in the way that we're moving, in our posture, that sort of thing? Next time you come back, turning your hands palm in, drawing your elbows apart, pigeon spreads its wings. In the opening and closing in your chest, in your back. And then double-handed push, pushing wave. Gentle curve up, not lifting your hands, but rather letting the forward movement push your hands forward and keeping the shape. Your hands will naturally curve up. Give you this feeling of sort of coming up underneath. Once more. And then hands loosely twisted just above your legs, winding back, turning the palm up, and then forwards. Hands stay roughly the same distance above your legs. Try not to lift your hands up. You don't need to do that. Just again, your arms extend out. So think about this movement outwards. If we think, I'm going to put my hands over there, we'll begin to strain in our arms. Just feel a widening of this angle between your body, your torso, and the top of your arm. You can see there, it gets bigger and narrower. And a sense of extensions through the top of your arm, through your elbow, through your wrist. Again, like the branch growing out from the trunk of the tree. So not straining, but rather that pattern of extension, of expansion and contraction, seeming to fill and empty your arms. So do one more of these, and then we're going to go back to pigeon spreads its wings, building the last three movements into a little sequence. It's quite nice to do this. You have to think about it a little bit more. You like the changeover, make sure you're not rushing. It's nice to get that feeling of flowing from one movement to another. But it will also make us more aware of subtle changes in our body. The weight is consistent. So the changes we're talking about are mostly in the upper part of the body. Changes to that pattern of expansion and contraction with each exercise. And that trained attention feeding back into our body, may be able to pay a bit more attention, do a bit more with those areas that are stiff or tight. courage, of movement, of energy in those areas. One more round. So open your fingers, turn your hands palm out, winding out, and then back in. Press forwards again. Turn your hands. Once more. Then you come back to this position. Bring the hands palm down, polishing the table. Turn and then go forwards. Turn, draw your arms around and back to this central position. Change direction. Again, just aware of the movements and sensations in your pelvis up to your shoulders and your back and your spine. Also in your side and the front of your body. One more on each side. Bring your hands palm up to a bit of pressure downwards through feet and hips, so your head going up, drawing your hands up and pressing down. Notice how this feels in your back and your spine. Sometimes you might not feel anything particularly, but sometimes we can feel a kind of tingling up and down the spine. And then turning your hands out and the wild goose. Once more. Next change is to part in the clouds. And that sort of progressive expansion working up through your body. Belly to solar plexus to chest. Just trying to get that sense of the flow, the movement, like a wave spreading out through your body, your fingertips, and then back in. One more time. Now, dragon plucks the stars from the sky. Feeling that wave-like movement up to one side. If you can feel that, just imagine that as the wave flows back and down, it can take away some of the tightness, stiffness, some of the sense of stagnation. You could almost visualize it. The left side of your body filling up and then just draining away through your head. This time, that same idea, but both hands are feeling the upward movement a little bit more central to your back, down at the middle of your back. Always coming back to this central point, sort of touch base. This time extend one foot. Your knees should still be a little bit bent, remember, like the gate. And knees forward, scooping the sea, looking at the sky. You may feel that you're going back just a little bit more. That's fine if you do that. Again, I can't use this arm, but just consider that if you do this, then we need to find a way to come back to the upright position without straining. So what we don't want to do is this, push the head forward or pull the head forwards. You think of a thread of elastic or an elastic band going from your toes up through your body, and then it contracts, particularly around here, around the area in front of your head and back. I'm exaggerating this, by the way. I'm going too far back, really. But you go a little bit back and you can still come forwards very smoothly. Then grasping the tiger's ears. Now, before we go into the full movement, let your hands drop down and do a kind of version of the first exercise we did. Bird folds its wings, going towards one leg. This time, very loosely fist your hands. If you grip tight, you'll find it will affect the rotation, but a loose fist shouldn't. And notice the angle of my back. Again, I am exaggerating a little bit, but there's a kind of trajectory that suggests a diagonal movement upwards and forwards. And that movement, that energy, helps your arms to come into the picture. Again, like a wave, perhaps, or however most useful for you to visualize it. One more time. Change over. So again, scooping the sea, looking at the sky. So I'm changing, again, grasping the tiger's ears. So going into this version of bird folds its wings, first of all, go through the same steps as we did previously. Even without the arms going up, you may feel as you go forwards this sort of gentle lengthening through your spine. Roll your fingers into a hollow fist. And then your arms swing up into grasping the tiger's ears. Always looking for the path of least resistance. That can have many implications. One of which, of course, is if it's painful to get your arms too high, then have them lower. The ideal position for this is that your hands end up level to your own ears, but you might not be comfortable taking them up that far. One more time. Now, sit back. Once again, coming back to the mountain, the watchtower, your center, whatever label you care to put on this. No label, no image, no idea is ever going to tell the whole story. So we use the ones that are most useful to us to bring us back. Move into your right hip a bit more and look for that same quality there. Holding the ball, parting the wild horse's mane. Going forwards. As you turn, feel how the turn just draws your left arm out. And then back into the hip, turn and move across. This time the turn, carrying the ball across. Now, your right shoulder leading, drawing your right hand away, almost like you're stretching out an elastic band, or sometimes they'll use the idea of tearing a sheet. It's like you get to here, you both hands on the sheet and you tear the sheet out. And that's quite an interesting image because it offers a degree of strength. And so if you use that image, if it's useful to you, you may feel that your hips, maybe your legs, certainly your back, become more part of that process. Once again, that sense of connection building. And not only that, but maybe, and I said earlier, see if you can move from that inner position, that inner awareness of stronger feeling around your spine, skeleton in general. And again, this is where we want that movement to start. It's almost as if the sheep was strong and resistant, I'm already moving forwards like this. And then suddenly the sheep tears. Again, that was exaggerated, very much exaggerated, much smoother process. But you can feel, you move your weight over into your right hip, you start to push the weight forward, then you feel movement in your shoulders, then in your elbow, and so on and so forth. It flows out through your arm, and this can relate to that idea of your arm growing out of your shoulder. And then with the step in, so step forward with your left foot, plant the foot down. You'll find that you're going forwards a little bit more than diagonal this time. Then precisely on where you put your foot. So you want your foot to go down somewhere that's comfortable for the movement. You can have it out there a little bit if you wanted to. And back. Feel too what's happening in your back. In this position, your back has a slightly rounded feel. So again, imagine that as an elastic sheet that contracts, that helps with that pulling out of your elbow. Lost my position there. One more on each side. And come back to rest again. Reminding yourself, not so much in this time of the structures that bring us into central equilibrium, but rather the qualities that we associate with it, because those qualities will be carried with us into the standing position. And I mentioned, different parts of the body expanding and contracting. In this position, the front and back and sides should feel as though they're equal and neutralizing each other. And then, once again, rubbing your hands together. Tapping over your face. Over your head and neck. Down to one shoulder, your arm. And the other side. Upper part of the chest. The belly. And the legs. Pushing your heels up, get the muscles of your legs a bit active again. And around. Back the other way. Okay. And then standing. So I'm going to move the chair out the way. As always, if it's interesting for you to have the chair there for that extra little bit of support, then by all means use that. Standing, looking for that quality of central equilibrium. And to go back to what I was saying about that sense of the front, back, and sides all equal, imagine yourself as being like a tent or maybe a pole standing up in a bit of a breeze with guide ropes coming out, and you could sway a little bit from side to side, forwards and backwards, and the guide ropes would always bring you back. Maybe go around in a little circle, and just again looking for that point where there's a feeling of neutrality. You won't maintain it. None of these positions are permanent. So again, a lot of this is about knowing how to come back. I'm not even sure that keeping them permanent will be desirable, because as soon as you start to move, you bring the exercises in, everything's going to change anyway. So we return to the mountain. So sinking down, do these as a little sequence. Rooting down at the bottom of the movement, change into the wild goose, and then at the bottom change into heart in the clouds. And as before, when we did a little sequence, just noting the changes, particularly in the upper part of your body, from one movement to another. They're not necessarily going to be the same each time. Some will be constant. Others will vary. And what we can begin to do is just to bring that awareness. So again, we're observing these movements, but what we observe can feed into our intent. You might think, well, that was nice. That felt good. Maybe I'll do it that way again, or maybe I'll look at this pattern or that pattern. So as we bring our intent to these things, and as we become more experienced in these movements, we can once again begin to bring about changes. We can discern what's useful, what isn't, encourage what is useful. And let your hands drop down. Good. Now, 1 foot forwards. Transferring your weight from 1 foot to another. Trying to be clear and precise about this. When you go forwards, 60% of your weight in the front, 40 in the back. When you go back, 70 in the back, 40 in the front. Obviously, that will change when we start to do the stepping. Also, particularly important when you go back to have an awareness that you want your weight going to the front part of the foot more than the back. You don't want to go right back in your heels, because that can happen very easily. And notice what helps you do that. Can you change the alignment of your pelvis, for instance? Are you perhaps focused too much on your shoulders at the moment? So from that point of observation, we can direct, we can intend. But then coming back, raising your toes and your heel, and more of your weight going in. Notice I've turned my front foot out just a little bit here. So that percentage of weight increases. And then just seeing if you can bring your foot in, just aware of your posture in that position, settling in, not hurrying. So all those elements that I was outlining right from the start of the class, some of them are easier to discern in the chair, others more obvious when you're standing. They're all part of this movement, which we choose to focus on, of course, down to our awareness. And then on the other side, but in the end, it's a bit like a jigsaw puzzle. You know, we want all of those things working for us. So we learn to move with central equilibrium. raising toes and stepping in. So remember, central equilibrium, the pathway to that, as I described it earlier, is through this quality of sung, but also it works the other way. The awareness that comes from being still helps us to go through that process of sung. Stepping through, noticing those moments where we go slightly out of line. So sometimes you'll see me, didn't have to put the foot down that time. Other times you'll see me just touch the toes to the ground. As soon as you feel yourself going out of line, look for that correction. And it's not consistent. It's like riding a bike. You know, sometimes you'll need to shift slightly to the right, sometimes to the left. Good. Okay, right foot forwards. There are a couple of rounds of fisherman cast there. Again, you know, noting where you feel the movements and the changes, particularly in the upper part of your body, because again, it's fairly consistent in your legs. This time, as you arrive in the front leg, turn to your left. Again, see how that separates your arms out as it did with part of the wild horse's mane earlier. Going into the movement, wind blows the willows. Try to build the movement from within rather than straining in shoulders and arms and hands. And the movements in our arms also come deeper in the arm, not just sort of muscles like the biceps and the tricep, but right down into our bones. So the movement, the energy flows through the whole of our body, lengthways, breadthways, and to the depth of our body. Good. And shake out. And then on the other side. Forwards and turning. And I'm going to turn my front foot out again, and we're going to bring the stepping into the movement. So you go forwards or backwards, you bring the foot in. Now, if you've got the equilibrium, maybe you can just raise your foot. If you haven't, maybe do a little less or don't do it at all. And again, it's not going to be consistent. It will vary from moment to moment. So we're carrying that process, carrying that ability to observe deep inside ourselves. I'm going to change direction. So the qualities of central equilibrium still present, hopefully. the awareness of what's involved in that as we go through the changes. And then bringing your feet down. Go back to your chairs. If you can do so safely and comfortably, doing that exercise, or even just walking outside on a bit of uneven ground, maybe a bumpy lawn or something like that, is quite interesting. Because I, I, I will go outside and do it, and there's a theoretical ideal place for the foot to step to, but sometimes you do that and there's a bump there or there's a hollow there. So it's not ideal. It's where in theory we learn to place the foot, and we look for that on a flat surface, but out there it's not the same. So we're increasingly guided by what I would call a kind of intuitive sense of alignment, root, of central equilibrium, and so on and so forth. It's no good putting your foot down on a bump and then wondering why it's a bit wobbly when you try and um, bring the other foot in, because you're on a bump. Yeah, you might just need, oh, theory says it should go there. Maybe there's a better place. So we learn from moment to move with whatever's happening. If the wind is blowing, that can make a difference. All sorts of things like that. So we learn to come back. We learn to come back to the various mind and body qualities of central equilibrium or centering. Again, don't get caught up on the terms so much. Just letting your hands drop down, and then embrace tiger, return to the mountain, return into central equilibrium. Not with the intent of always being there. We move out from there into our lives, but come back on a regular basis. So this is an art of change, of moving with change. One more time. And rest. And open the eyes. Lovely. Thank you as always, everybody. So take care in colder weather, but enjoy your practice.